Hey there! Welcome to week 2 of our Birds and Bees Dating and Healthy Relationships, a 6-week series for youth. Week 2 is how to communicate well. So last week we went over what even are relationships, and we talked about different kinds of attraction. So if you haven't watched that one, go ahead and give it a watch as well. This one is about how to communicate well. So if you've talked to a couple that's been together for a long time, married or not, and you ask them what the most important thing is about their relationship, they will often say, communication. Communication is the best thing you can do to keep a relationship healthy and happy. So, what even is communication? On a basic level, it is the passing of information between people. There's generally 5 accepted modes of communication: writing, speaking, visual, listening, and nonverbal. And each of these kinds of communications has its pros and cons. Writing. Some examples of writing would be letters via snail mail, emails, texts, past notes, cards, chats and DMs, posting words online. Speaking. Talking face-to-face, talking on the phone, talking on video chats, voice chat online like on Discord. Sharing videos of speaking. Nonverbal communication. That includes body language, tone, facial expressions, emojis, eye contact, hand movements, touching, and others as well. Some examples of visual communication: sharing pictures, sharing GIFs, posting pics online, and sharing memes. Listening. So of the 5 types of communication, listening is different because no communication is possible without listening. Listening is the act of receiving the communication, whether it is through speaking, nonverbal, visual, or writing. And so in order for communication to happen, there has to be one person sharing information and the other person receiving information, aka listening. Listening is important for communication. Pros and cons of written communication. Pros: you can take time to think about what you want to say and use the exact words you mean to use. Cons of written communication: you don't get to hear the person's tone or see their body language. So sometimes if someone sends you a text message telling you something and you feel like they're angry at you, you're going to read it as if they're angry at you, and maybe that's not how they meant to come across at all. And so without knowing someone's tone or seeing their body language, it can be so much harder to understand what someone is saying with written communication. And then again, on the bright side, some of us are better at communicating through writing, and we can say what we want to say better that way. So, it really depends on the situation. Pros and cons of speaking communication. Pros: you get to see the other person's body language and hear their tone and experience more of how they feel. You can have more empathy with a person when you are speaking face-to-face. Cons: sometimes it's scarier to be confronted directly, and you might not catch every word they say and miss something. So all of us are different kinds of learners. There's visual learners, auditory learners, people who learn by doing, and so when all of us learn differently, it means that all of us have different strengths and weaknesses of listening. And so sometimes some of us are better at reading someone's words and remembering them than we are at hearing someone's words and remembering them, and vice versa. And so those are some of the pros and cons of speaking communication. Pros and cons of nonverbal communication. Pros: it is very easy to communicate a lot of things nonverbally, and it's also fun sometimes. So, when you're with a group of people and someone says something kind of goofy or off the wall, and then you look at your other friend and you share a glance like, haha, that was goofy and off the wall, without saying anything. That's an example of nonverbal communication. Cons of nonverbal communication: not everyone is fully capable of reading and understanding body language and facial expressions. So this happens with people who are neurodivergent or on the autism spectrum. Not everyone is good at recognizing what body language and facial expressions mean, and so it's good to use other kinds of communication with people who struggle with this, so that they can feel included and cared for. Pros and cons of visual communication. Pros: it is simple and fast to send a picture rather than words, and it can be more fun, especially if you're visually oriented. Cons: pictures and images can be interpreted in more than one way. So you may send a picture to someone of something, and then they get a different message from it altogether than what you meant to send. So yeah, the pros and cons of these different kinds of communication means that there are different situations in which some kinds of communication are better than others. And in relationships, especially romantic relationships, we have to figure out what kinds of communication are best for what kinds of situations. I want to talk more about body language and nonverbal communication because that is a large way that people communicate. Some helpful examples, you can look at people's eyes. If they have dilated or constricted pupils, sometimes, and let me put a disclaimer on this, all of these examples of nonverbal communication don't always work 100% of the time or mean what they're supposed to 100% of the time, but they're pretty good indicators. And so, dilated or constricted pupils. Oftentimes people's pupils, like the little black spots in the center of their eyes, we all have them, will dilate or get bigger when they see something that they like or want. And so, if someone's eyes are dilating when they're looking at you, that could mean that they like you. Blinking. If a person is blinking a lot, they might be uncomfortable or nervous. Eye contact. If a person is making good eye contact with you, that can mean that, they're interested in what you have to say to them or interested in you. A lack of eye contact might mean they're feeling awkward or want to escape. You can look at people's hands. So if someone comes up to you with clenched fists, closed hands, that's a little more threatening than if a person comes up to you with open hands or not clenched fists. And then you can use your hands for gestures, so sometimes you use your hands when you're talking. There's also an entire language that is all about hand gestures and facial expressions. It's sign language. And then there are also other hand gestures you can do that are signs, like flipping the bird or giving a peace sign or things like that. Those are also forms of nonverbal communication. Arms and legs. If someone's arms and legs are crossed, that's considered a closed body position, and they may not be as interested in talking to you. Versus if someone's arms are uncrossed and their legs are uncrossed, that could mean they're more open to hearing what you have to say. This is also not 100% because sometimes people sit with their legs crossed just because it's comfortable. So you have to look for other indicators of body language when that's happening. Hands on hips can be read as kind of aggressive sometimes. Fidgeting. If a person is fidgeting, they might be nervous or bored. Or they may just be a chronic fidgeter, like I am. I always have to be fidgeting with something. You can also just look at where a person's body points, because often we all have basic animal instincts, and so we often will point ourselves at things that we are interested in, or things that we want. And so pay attention to if someone's body is pointing towards you or away from you, and that could be a good sign of whether they like you or want to talk to you or not. You could look at someone's posture. If they're all kind of crunched in on themselves, and it's not because their body is just like that, it's because that's something they're doing, that could mean that they're withdrawing or retreating or wanting to get away from you. Whereas if a person is standing up more straight, that could be a sign of openness. And then distance. This one is awkward in our time of social distancing right now, where we're all standing kind of far apart from each other. But the distance that someone stands from you can be a good indicator of how close they feel to you. Like a person who feels like a really close friend or a romantic partner is going to stand really close to you, versus an acquaintance is going to stay a few feet away, versus a complete stranger is going to stay even farther than that away. And so how close a person stands to you is a good indicator of how interested they might be in you. Those are some examples of nonverbal communication that might be helpful in trying to figure out. Maybe if you have a crush on somebody and you're trying to figure out if they like you back, you can pay attention to their body language and their nonverbal communications, and maybe you can get a hint of whether they like you or not. Or, if you are in a relationship, you can pay attention to their body language to know if they are happy with you or not. Serious and non-serious communication. So I feel like sometimes you just need to share basic facts, like non-serious stuff, making plans to meet up, regular chatter, and talking. And there are good modes of communication for serious and non-serious talking. And so, really the best modes for non-serious communication are any of them. You could send a text, you could make a call, you could do a video chat, send a DM, just any of that. But for serious communication, this often needs to happen if you're upset and you need answers or reassurance. And the best methods for serious communication are face-to-face or video chat. When you're talking about something serious with a person, especially a person you're in a romantic relationship with, it is very good to be able to see their face and see their body and know what they're feeling and thinking. It's good to have as many lanes of communication open up as you can at once when you are talking about something serious. Never underestimate the value of an I statement. So if you are having a conflict with a person that you're in a relationship with, I statements are a really good way to express how you're feeling without coming across as mean or aggressive or accusatory. And so the I statement goes, when you blank, I feel blank. So an example of this would be, when you say my favorite movie is stupid, I feel hurt and embarrassed. And that comes across as better than just saying, you're a butthead. Because you're being specific and giving specific feedback. A non-example of this, of an I statement, would be, when you are being a butthead, I feel like you are the worst. Because you need to focus on specific actions or words from them and focus on your own feelings. And that's the best way to communicate when you're feeling upset. I statements are so valuable and so helpful. So if you don't remember anything else from this PowerPoint on communication, remember the I statement. Another helpful thing you can do if you're having a conflict with someone that you're in a relationship with, avoid absolutes. So absolutes are words like always, never, all, none, every, only. So an example of using an absolute like that would be, you never listen to me. And that's just not as helpful as if you say, you often seem distracted and zoned out when we talk. Because saying, you never listen to me is probably wrong. There probably are times when the person does listen to you. It's just not all the time, and maybe it's kind of a problem. And so you want to soften it, and speak in a kinder way by saying, you often seem distracted and zoned out when we talk. And that is, first of all, it comes across in a more kind way, but also it's more truthful and accurate than saying never or always. Avoiding absolutes helps you communicate in a softer and more truthful way. Finally, as far as communication goes, and if you're having a conflict with someone, you just have to be brave. It can be scary and intimidating to honestly express how you feel sometimes, but it is important to communicate, especially if you're upset. You have to communicate that. A person who loves you and cares about you will be able to hear what you have to say without rejecting you or your words. So that is very important to hear. Let me read it to you again. A person who loves you and cares about you will be able to hear what you have to say without rejecting you or your words. If you do communicate your serious feelings to a person you're in a relationship with, and they are ignored, dismissed, laughed at, or reacted to badly, then that is bad behavior on that person's part, and they are not good or right for you. And it might be best to end the relationship, because it is vital that you be in a relationship with someone who listens to you, and someone who you, in turn, listen to. And that's about all I have for you. So as you go on with your day, think about, what would you say are your strengths and weaknesses in communication? Like, what kind of communication are you good at? Maybe it's writing, or maybe it's talking. Just think about that, and think about areas you need to grow. And if you have any questions or observations or ideas, feel free to chat to me anytime after school in the loft, or come to a youth group in person, and then you can ask your questions when we do this stuff for the first time. I hope you will have a good week. I hope that this lesson on communication helped you at least a little bit. Remember the I statement, and communicate well, and be a good human, and I love you. Bye!